Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And I'm Lyssa Lizards.
And we're your reptile girlies. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, fam.
We have a little bit of housekeeping. A very exciting upcoming milestone. When we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, we're doing a live stream.
I'm so freaking hyped, guys. Please help us get to 500 subs just so that we can go live with y'all. Because that's we're holding out just a little bit in order to just hit that number.
We're hoping it'll be like a live episode.
That's
right?
what I really want to do.
Have you guys participate and chat along with us and
make friends in the comments.
Yeah, this is something we've been really excited to do. But I feel like you have to have enough subscribers I mean, we will happily hang out with 3 of you, but
all day.
But I think it'll be more fun if we can get a good group of people,
and it's extra fun to hit that milestone. So we're very excited. So tell your friends, subscribe, and then join us live. We're so excited.
Looking forward to that. And thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel already. And if you've done the subscription or Patreon to get early access to the episodes,
big thanks.
Yeah, very excited for you guys to be able to do that.
Super appreciative of you guys. It's something that's just an extra fun thing if you guys want to get early access or just support us. So we appreciate you all.
Yeah. And I know you have a little bit of news with your enclosure. So you want to fill everyone in?
Yeah. So I just got 3 new enclosures that I'm really, really, really hyped about. And they are 4 foot by 2 foot by 18 inch. And they are going to be massive upgrades for my leopard gecko, my African fat tail gecko, and my tiger salamander Kermit.
So at this point, they're all built. That was a process, right?
Dude, okay. Literally,
she's texting me at 1 a.m. being like, SOS.
If you saw that video on TikTok, just know that it was quite literally filmed at almost 3 a.m. because I was going insane. Because I built 3 of them, and the first 2 I made mistakes on.
Yeah, it happened.
It was ridiculous. I apparently stupidly assumed that the label that was on there that said, this is the front, would say the same thing on all 3. But there was one that said, this is the back. And I put it in the front.
When I build IKEA furniture, I just recently got a new TV stand. It was not IKEA, but same idea. I always have to, I'm like, it takes an hour to build it. I'm like, okay, I need to factor in an extra 30 minutes minimum.
Easily.
Because I will get something wrong.
Easily.
Every time, without fail. No matter how closely I read the instructions, it happens.
But the problem with these enclosures... There's no room for error.
Once they're built, they're stuck.
You literally cannot unhammer this top in. And that it was the top that I put on backwards. So my husband and I literally had to figure out basically what that meant is that in the front of the enclosure, there weren't 2 tracks for the doors.
Oh.
So we had to come up with a solution for the doors. And luckily they did include a little piece that I was able to
Jimmy rig in there kind of thing.
Figure it out. So we ended up finding a solution, but there is one enclosure that the doors are a little wobbly.
It's okay. It's fine. So they're all built. So next up, you're going to do what? Custom backgrounds?
Yeah. I'm going to get some of that. If you guys have ever seen the method where you use that purple foam and you cut all of that out and then use the grout. So I'm going to try that method.
Those are going to look so good.
Dude, I'm so excited. It's been a huge challenge just during wedding year and wedding planning and everything. There have been so many things that I've wanted to do, but I have quite literally, unfortunately, just been doing the bare minimum for all of 2023 because I was so crazy busy in my personal life.
And it's not just one, you're doing multiple enclosures at the same time.
I'm quite literally upgrading almost every single one of my reptiles this year.
That's a lot.
It's a huge undertaking and it's just a lot, so it feels really, really good to get part of it built, done.
They're in there. Backgrounds are next. Then all the full goodies on the inside. Yep, and then putting the critters. critters inside.
I'm so ready. I'm so ready to get them into those enclosures. It is long overdue.
Yeah. So we'll keep you guys in the loop through the podcast as the process goes on. But be sure to drop her a follow at Lyssa's Lizards because you'll be posting videos through the entire process. So if you're looking for some inspo,
you'll get updated there a little bit more quickly than on here.
Faster than the pod for sure.
Yeah.
Plus, then you get to see all the visuals and everything too, like DIY.
You're working on some enclosure upgrades too, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. So I'm not building them myself. I'm reaching out to a couple different, pros really, because we're looking for like really big chameleon enclosures. And if I'm going custom, we're going
all out.
Yeah, I want all the gadgets. I want all the gizmos. I want the dimmer lights. I want all the bells and whistles.
Dude, I'm so hyped for you. It's going to be so cool.
It's taking forever
to
get it done.
It's a whole process, man. Trust me, I've been planning my upgrades for like over 6 to 8 months.
No,
and
I'm
it's finally
hoping
happening.
Maybe by summer is now what I'm hoping would be realistic.
Like that's a doable timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in conversations in the works, but nothing has been
finalized,
built yet or is in process. But very much looking forward to those. But my guys are okay in their current enclosures.
Mine are like some of mine are very much like for example, my leopard gecko, he's perfectly fine in his 36 inch long enclosure, but he's going to get a 4-foot. And I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Little old man Charlie.
I know he deserves the best.
Yeah.
So I'm pumped.
So those are our updates on kind of enclosures, because I know we had mentioned previously in episodes that that's something we were both prioritizing for 2024. So just keeping you guys in loop, holding ourselves accountable, that we're,
we appreciate you for also holding us accountable.
Yes. Where is the enclosure? I'm working on it.
It's coming, guys. It's all coming.
Yes. So we're going to be talking about a very highly, I don't know if debate is the right word, opinionated topic.
Also highly requested. You guys have asked us many times in our Q&As.
We couldn't just pick one username of someone who has asked us because there's a bunch of you.
Too many of you to shout out.
Yeah. But we're talking beginner reptiles and...
Beginner.
Yes, we should, air quotes, this is what people call these reptiles. So this is what we're going to be referring to them as, but we're going to be giving our 2 cents on whether or not they should actually be beginner reptiles, what we would actually recommend as beginner reptiles, and
lots of recs.
in the nuances that come with classifying reptiles as beginner versus advanced.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuances. There's a like you said, this is a little bit debated.
Buckle up, guys. This is gonna get
using the word beginner can be a little bit of a hot button topic.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people get kind of heated about calling any reptiles beginners. I'm personally not a big fan of the word.
No, I am on the side of being a primarily chameleon keeper, where we get dubbed as advanced.
100%.
And people will get shot down for wanting a chameleon because they're advanced. So I'm on the opposite end of it, where I don't like the fact that they're called advanced, right? Which then goes hand in hand with beginner.
I don't like that leopard geckos and bearded dragons are called beginners. So it's totally opposite tracks here.
But they're connected, right? They're all tied together.
It's all the same issue.
Yeah. So I think what we should start out with is just primarily why people are calling these beginner.
Great question.
Beginner animals and what that entails. So really what this stemmed from, my 2 cents, is that people were wanting to get into the reptile hobby.
Totally.
There's so many different reptiles you can choose from, which can be overwhelming.
Super overwhelming.
So then you ask the question, well, what reptile should I start out with? And it's with this idea that you need certain level experience prior to owning what would then be the next level up, right? And that's where it gets... where it gets complicated.
I know that when you wanted a chameleon, you were definitely shot down a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. So it wasn't do you want a reptile? It was do you want a chameleon? Right. Yeah. And it was the same with my dog. It wasn't, I want a dog. It was, I want a Dalmatian. And they're also very similar of they're considered
high energy,
that you would need some dog breed experience prior to owning them.
Right.
So chameleons are in the category of being advanced.
Totally.
And so people told me...
And as somebody whose chameleon was my second reptile, I know you disagree with it, but I do think they're more advanced than some species.
Right.
But again, it varies and it depends.
Right. And so people would tell me you should get a crested gecko before you get a chameleon. I'm like, but I don't want a crested gecko.
I want a chameleon.
I now own a crested gecko, but that's besides the point. At the time,
you were dead
the
set.
chameleon.
You had your heart set on a chameleon.
Yeah, but people were saying that you should get a crested gecko. The other beginners we always see are bearded dragons,
leopard geckos, ball pythons.
Yep.
Those, I think, in my opinion, those are the 4 species that are like the most commonly labeled as beginners.
And I think it's because the availability that comes
100%.
with them. You can walk into a PetSmart, Petco any day of the week and you will find a beardy, a ball python, a Leo.
Or on the flip side, even if you are going to expos and like, looking for breeders, things like that, even when you go to expos, the majority of the animals at expos are those 4 species.
The supply of those species is quadruple and other species.
In my opinion, a little oversaturated in the market. But
right. We've talked about that.
I digress.
As well. Yeah. So people are calling them beginner because they're readily available, and then people think that their care is so easy.
But I will say, I think another part of the reason why more people want to get them is because they Google it and there's tons and tons and tons and care info, whether that's the right or wrong info.
Yeah.
There's tons of info readily available.
Yep.
And that's probably a big part of it too.
Yeah. I think where people have a hard time with calling a beardy a beginner, a Leo a beginner, a cresty or a ball python beginner is that there's this misconception that they're easy to keep, and then easy is correlated with little research, little cost, right? Like, oh, it's just low effort.
Low effort, low maintenance. And those are not words that I would ever describe any reptile, any pet
Which is the problem of this entire terminology of this beginner advanced. Like, a bearded dragon is going to need a UVB bulb just like a chameleon needs a UVB bulb, which I'm only using as an example because they're stereotypical advanced reptile. Like, everyone considers a chameleon advanced. Then you're also going to need a strict supplement schedule with a bearded dragon that you would also need with a chameleon.
Absolutely.
Then if you look at the diet, I would say a bearded dragon's diet is more complicated than a chameleon's diet. Chameleons are exclusively insectivores. Beardies need bugs and
veggies,
everything else.
Bugs, veggies, and like sometimes fruits. I mean, it's a lot more complex.
Way more complicated, right? Then you're looking at the space requirements. I would say a chameleon takes up less space than a bearded dragon would because they're horizontal versus vertical.
But see, in my opinion, I hear you, and that's 100% true that horizontal is technically more space. You can do more with vertical space.
Yeah.
But in general, a beardy enclosure, and it's debated right now on the enclosure size of bearded dragons. I know that standard is, going up and pushing for more and all of that. But but in general, a 2 by 2 by 4 or a 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure for both of those species, that is not a small animal.
No.
That is not a small space commitment.
No.
I mean, both of those are larger species.
And we're using beardy specifically because that's probably the number one,
top,
most recommended first beginner reptile. But as we go down the list of bearded dragon care requirements, it is near similar.
It's very, very similar
to all the other requirements that you would need for any other reptile species.
And mind you, I would consider myself, I would never ever call myself an expert in any way, shape, or form, but I would consider myself an advanced reptile keeper.
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. I don't have a bearded dragon because they are so freaking needy. I know how much time they require in order to be properly cared for. They need more socialization. They need more time out of their enclosure. They literally will bang on their enclosure door if they're not getting out enough. I don't have time for that.
Right. But then if we also look at ball pythons, cresties, and Leos, right, the other 3 that we commonly see recommended as beginner reptiles, those also need all the other things that we just talked about, right? And
100%.
so that's why it is so frustrating for people who are deep in the hobby to see the term beginner reptile just thrown around.
I get and love you guys for commenting, engaging in my content, all of that. But the amount of people that ask me, what beginner reptile? I'm like, none. None are beginners.
Or this drives me nuts. Which one's the easiest?
Literally none. If you're looking for an easy pet,
which one's the easiest?
If you're looking for an easy pet, get a Tamagotchi. Get a freaking Tamagotchi, okay?
Stop. Those are get a plushie. Yeah. No, and that is what is so frustrating, because that like thought process of like I'm looking for the one that's easiest just like gives me the like sick feeling in my stomach, because
Gives me the
that
ick.
to me makes me think that you're looking for the like the easy way out, or the least amount of effort, the least amount of cost, the least amount of space. And if that's the case, then you shouldn't be owning the pet. Like you should be willing to do whatever it is
Always.
for the species you want, not the one that is recommended, but the one you want.
And I know that that's your big take on the whole like advanced versus beginner thing, right? So like you're very much on the side because, like you said, people encouraged you to get something that you didn't want.
Yeah.
And your first reptile was a chameleon. And you have killed it from day one. Not the animal, but the whole.
Yeah, let's be very clear.
Sorry.
And you killed it.
I immediately realized how that sounded. But no, but you have literally from day one had your setup. I mean, you've made changes and advancements and things like that. But from day one, you've had like the higher standard of care.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, I think, what it comes down to is like, instead of calling these beginner or advanced reptiles, what we would recommend as your first reptile. And I guess that assumes that you would be having multiples. But I guess that's also
first or only.
Yeah.
Up to you.
Yeah. Doesn't mean there has to be a second one.
Right.
But your first pet reptile should be, most importantly, the one you want. The one that gets you excited.
Because here's the thing. If you're getting the one that you want, if that is really the animal that you want, and quite honestly, if you want an animal in general, you shouldn't be half-assing it.
Correct.
You need to be going full steam ahead, full effort, full care, full time commitment.
Snaps.
Yes. You cannot do it halfway. You simply can't. And so the thing is, like, if you're going to go full steam ahead for it, why not just get the one that you want?
It has to be the one that you are willing and wanting to spend hours researching.
Days,
hours,
months.
and hours and hours, potentially months, potentially years. I researched chameleons for about 2 years before I even got one. Like, you have to be willing and wanting to put in so much time into the research phase. That's part one. Then you have to be willing.
That's not even everything else.
That's step one. Then you have to be willing to put in whatever cost is required for the health of the animal, whatever space enclosure is required for the health of the animal. And that goes back to what we're saying. You don't half-ass it. You don't cut corners, because you want the best life possible.
And to that point, if you're doing what somebody else tells you and getting something that is, lesser according to them.
Right.
But
introductory,
but it's not what you want. You can't tell me that you're not going to give that less time and attention than the animal that you would want. Yeah,
right? and then why are you getting that animal
in the first place?
To check a box,
right?
To say you kept this thing before you were able, like, what? The reason why people are saying that is because they want you to learn, right? And maybe a species that's a little more forgiving if you make mistakes,
100%,
right?
Yeah.
I can understand that thought process, but if we do it right from the beginning, if we have a strong understanding of what the heck UVB supplements are from the beginning, then we don't need to check that lesser box of this animal that people have deemed has a higher margin for error. Because if you do it right from the beginning, if you buy from a good breeder, then like you'll be okay.
Yeah. And you're like the perfect case study for that.
I'm showing it, and you can hear, at least, like, we're getting very like passionate about this.
Little heated.
But it's because it is so incredibly frustrating, not only for us as content creators. I obviously give like mentorship,
Tons of advice,
to individuals, but like these poor animals.
I know.
Right? Like, they're the ones who's suffering. Yeah.
And that's coming from somebody who like I've made so many mistakes. Like, I will preach all day long about all the mistakes that I've made. And
that's okay.
Everything.
That is honestly expected. We learn from it. We grow from it.
But in all honesty, I wasn't full steam ahead. I was not doing all the research. I did a lot of research, but I wasn't doing the right research because I didn't know better at the time.
Right.
And if I would have spent more time on it, I would have made less mistakes. So it's a very nuanced topic.
Yes. So if that's kind of the
mentality.
Yeah, the synopsis of this like beginner advanced scenario. So then I think it's only fair that we give you guys recommendations of animals
totally
that maybe we would recommend as your first reptiles. But I think what we want to caveat this, and we, just so you guys know, we talked like for an hour before this of like
we had a whole prep session.
What do we want to cover? How do we want to go about saying this? And the two things I wrote down that were criteria for like your first reptile or beginner reptile can you get a healthy animal, and is there enough solid care information that you would feel confident?
I would say solid and consistent.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you're researching an animal and you're seeing tons and tons of conflicting care info, like that's going to make it a lot harder for you.
Yeah. So you have to be able to find an animal that is well-bred, healthy. You would never, for a first-time keeper, recommend something that is
hard to find,
wild caught, or poorly bred, or just isn't readily available.
Or honestly, and by readily available, that's saying the same thing as like not bred often. There are a lot of species out there that aren't bred very often, and so therefore they're hard to find, they're rare, which usually means that there's less information out there on their care.
And why are we saying that having that solid, consistent care information is a huge factor?
Because if you're seeing a lot of conflicting stuff and you're not really certain on all the specifics, then you're essentially experimenting on this animal for yourself, and that's the situation that you don't want to be in.
And then it's really hard to grasp those more complicated topics like UVB or supplementation.
This is such a good little like point. I love this. But basically, like when people say, that an animal is more advanced or more experienced, it's because that experienced person understands that you need to know the basics of reptile care. You need to, like you were saying, you have to understand the concept of UGC or the concept of UVB as a whole. You have to understand the everything that involves a supplement schedule. You have to understand the complexities of a diet. You have to understand the complexities of keeping humidity up in an enclosure, keeping temperatures correct. Like those
how do you
are the
even
basics.
Control those?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
You're like, hey, I know my species needs this humidity, but my home is this. And like you have to know how you can
even the basics of like what tools to use. If you've never heard of a thermostat before, much less used one, then and there's a dimming thermostat or there's like a manual thermostat. There's so many different things.
Yes.
So those are, I think, the basics that somebody needs to know in order to go into owning almost any reptile.
Right.
And so therefore, like until you know those basics, you shouldn't be getting any reptile in general.
But if there's tons of great care information that simplifies that makes it easy to understand, that sets you up for success, that is going to put you way ahead of species that maybe only a handful of keepers are keeping. So for example, I have a Christopher Parsons chameleon. There is no Christopher Parsons care sheet. It does not exist. There are 2 breeders that I was able to contact beforehand, but I also had a couple of years of chameleon experience under my belt.
Yeah.
So then I felt comfortable. What I would then consider is an advanced species because they're not readily available, because there's not tons of care information, versus say a male veiled or a male panther chameleon.
Right.
Those are my go-to. If you want a pet chameleon, start there. Because of exactly what we've just said.
Yes.
There's tons of great breeders. There's tons of great info. So then you can understand how UVB and supplements are intertwined to each other. So then when you're taking care of another species from Madagascar, you already have that baseline knowledge. And then you have understanding of, what a healthy animal looks like, what a sick animal looks like.
The signs of all of that.
So then you're like, hey, their poops aren't looking great. Let me make these adjustments. Like you already have that knowledge to be able to then care for an animal that doesn't have as much readily available information.
And you just said something that I think is also important in terms of like us making like recommendations and things like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned male veiled and male panthered. Why is that?
Because they don't lay eggs.
And that is true for most reptile species.
Yes. So having the males just takes that out of the equation. I now own a female panther chameleon who will be dealing with eggs, but I would never recommend that to a new keeper because there's an added complexity of having to deal with infertile eggs, and then the stress and honestly just the anxiety of like, could she get egg bound? Could she die? I just see it in new keepers all the time.
The same thing goes for female leopard geckos, female African fat-tailed geckos, bearded dragons can also lay infertile eggs. Like all of those, for the most part, when it comes to gender and recommending reptiles for somebody who's a new reptile keeper, I would just not recommend females at first. My first gecko was a PetSmart baby, unfortunately, but because of that, I it was a gamble. I literally had to look up at like 16 years old, how to sex a leopard gecko on Google.
Your Google history.
And I had to do it myself.
Yeah.
I had to look up how to do that. And I just it was luck of the draw that I got a male.
A male.
Thank God I got a male. But if I had gotten a female, I would have had no idea what to do if she ended up being egg bound.
And it goes back to that margin for error, right? By having a female reptile, your margin for error is significantly
higher.
Yeah.
Significantly is a better word. But
Well, it would be less margin for error,
True.
right?
Yeah,
because you can't afford to have improper care, or she's not going to be able to lay her eggs, get egg bound. It is the number one cause of death in females. Yeah, and it's just most times is preventable and is due to husbandry care issues. So again, goes back to being on point with your care.
Yes, but just number one recommendation, stick with males your first go if you can.
Yep.
So
okay, beyond finding an animal that you actually want, beyond an animal that is readily available, that has lots of care information, that's a male, what would you say are some maybe specific species you would recommend?
So for one that is, I would highly recommend leopard geckos and African fat-tailed geckos. I think they kind of they have different care, but for me, those are ones, specifically leopard geckos, that are known as like a beginner. And I personally would recommend those. Those are ones that I do think that they are great for a lot of people. And I think the reason being is that they are typically easily handleable. You can always get stuck with an individual who hates handling it, isn't going to be okay with it. But for the most part, they're usually very easy to handle. I think they're a better size than some of the recommended ones like bearded dragons, stuff like that.
They get big, yeah.
And they do require a big-ish enclosure. At a bare minimum, I think leopard geckos need a 36 by 18 by 18. And I think that's a great size, but it's not as big as, a 4 to 6 foot enclosure for a bigger animal.
Sure.
So they're a reasonable size. And I also think their diet is a little bit more simple. It's live insects. So if you're squeamish with insects, it's not a good option for you. But I think it's very simple, that you can go and get live insects. There's not complexities to it. Like let's say bearded dragons where they need, insects
the
and
salads
vegetables
and everything else.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more simplistic, a little bit. But there are still a lot of misconceptions about those too, that they don't need UVB and this and that. And there's still a lot of conflicting info out there about them, but they're readily available. They are you can find them healthy almost anywhere. There's a ton of care info out there about them. And I would suggest that there is more correct care info out there than there is wrong nowadays.
That's great.
I think it's getting better and better. And then African fat-tailed geckos, I think are in the same vein of leopard geckos, where they need a lot of the same things. They need about the same enclosure size. They definitely need, higher humidity. There are differences, but for all the same reasons, I would recommend a leopard gecko. I would also recommend an African fat-tailed gecko. I just think they're wonderful, and they have some of the best personalities.
I was gonna say, I wasn't sure if you're gonna touch on that, but their personalities are so much fun.
They're so fun. They're so unique. They're all very different, and they're just so much more personable than some other reptile species.
One we were talking about before we started recording was crested geckos, because those are notorious in the list of beginner reptiles.
I don't recommend.
In my 2 cents, in my frustration with people recommending crested geckos, is they just try to dumb down their care and make it like super simple, super easy, but in fact is actually, in my opinion, not suitable care. Because they're like, oh, you just need to feed them powdered, food or whatever, right? The gecko diet. And it's like, okay, yes, that is part of their diet, but you still need to feed them bugs.
And it is true. They can easily survive on only that diet, but then you're depriving them of
the
hunting
quality
and
of life.
Right,
yeah. But people be like, oh, you want a reptile, you don't like bugs? Get a crested gecko.
And it's like, sure, that is true to an extent. They can only eat that. But again, you're depriving them of some of their natural behaviors.
A reptile doesn't need UVB, and that's the other thing with crested geckos is people are like, oh, they just keep them at room temp. They don't need any heat bulb. They don't need any lights. They don't need all this. Just throw them in this tiny little glass enclosure, a little fruit paste, and they're good.
And I couldn't agree more. Like, the simplification of the care is one of the most frustrating parts about this whole conversation and the whole topic in general, because there's just so many, my brain is spiraling with like so many different things on this topic, but in my opinion, I would not recommend a crested gecko because I think talking about personalities, in my opinion, crested geckos kind of have two options for personalities.
Yes.
They're either flat out psychotic and crazy and jumpy and insane, or they're super chill, which is great. But a lot of people recommend crested geckos for kids.
Yeah. So if we take the care out of the equation, just the individual animal, they are so jumpy. And while if you learn their behavior, they can be very predictable. Like you can know when they're about to jump. But someone who's not experienced with reptiles is not going to be able to predict that behavior. They're just going to belly flop on the ground. They're going to drop their tail. The kid's going to freak out because they don't even know that they dropped their tail.
The dropping of the tail is huge to me too. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
So that's why I get a little frustrated with crested geckos, because could it survive in an enclosure
literally,
with just...
Dude, years ago, I don't even know if I hope people are still not doing this, but crested geckos in particular, I have literally seen people keep them in a tub. Granted, it's a taller-ish tub, but it's still not arboreal enough, in my opinion. But in a tub with unprinted blank newspapers as the coverage. And yes, that animal can hide in there. Sure, it's great for coverage, but like...
Quality of life, right?
You're keeping it in a box of office supplies? Really? Like, what do you...
Put a highlighter in there?
Like, are you joking? Like, no, you cannot tell me that animal is living a quality of life.
No, and this goes back to that episode we did on surviving versus thriving, right? Is the animal alive? Absolutely. Are they thriving? Are you providing them the best life possible? Absolutely not.
You can't tell me that animal is supposed to be hiding around in some newspaper. That's insane.
No, and so to recommend an animal because it's the easier option, or you're not comfortable providing...
It's very similar to the surviving versus thriving conversation. Just because an animal can survive in minimal conditions does not make it a beginner animal for people.
Right. And it goes back to what we said in the beginning. Do you want it?
Right.
And are you willing?
And how bad do you want it?
Right. Are you willing to do what it takes? Right. So that's the thing. Okay. So that would be your recommendation for a beginner lizard.
Gecko. I would say gecko, but for anybody who may want a bigger reptile, I would actually recommend a blue-tongued skink over a bearded dragon, personally. And I have a northern blue-tongued skink, but what I like about blue-tongued skinks is that there's more than one option on the type.
Yep.
If you're wanting an animal that is a little bit more tropical species, has like higher humidity, which can be really fun to do like bioactive stuff with and things like that.
Totally.
If you're wanting something like that, you can get a, what are they called? Indonesian or Halmahera blue-tongued skink. Or you can go the more arid version and get a northern blue-tongued skink if you want.
I have some homework to do after this episode.
I know. I'm saying a bunch of
look up all these things.
Bunch of different types of species, but that's the cool thing is there's options there versus bearded dragons. There's options when it comes to morphs and things like that.
Right, but not like the geography or the environment that you would need to provide for them. That and they are bigger, right? But they're not going to be anything.
No,
crazy.
So if you're wanting a bigger lizard that has care that is totally doable, totally manageable, I know we've talked about like the variance of the diets being a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
But a blue-tongued skink is one that they eat meat, they eat not lettuce, different types of greens. But they eat those things that are readily available in your household.
Right.
And you definitely, again.
It is more complex though than just like an exclusively like bug diet. But if you're weighing between maybe a bearded dragon and a blue-tongued skink and you're okay with having a diet that is more varied, then it might be a good one to consider.
Totally. And they're also very personable. They can have great personalities. They can also have really sassy personalities, which is fun too. But it's just, I really, really love that species.
Yeah, I feel like they're slept on a little bit. Like people don't give them the credit they deserve. Yeah,
I know. And I feel like it's not that they aren't readily available because they're very readily available. You can find blue-tongued skink breeders.
Right. They're not in PetSmart. Right. So then people aren't going to be having exposure to them or knowing that they're out there. And even at expos, I don't see many blue-tongued skinks.
No, I had mine shipped to me. So it was very different.
Gosh,
but
the baby skinks,
they're so cute. They're so tiny.
And they're just
They're little nuggets.
They're just little miniature versions.
They
look like the adults, just tiny.
Okay, this is a complete tangent.
Okay, go for it.
Complete tangent. Has nothing to do with reptiles, but it's very similar to what we're talking about right now. Did you see that recently they photographed what they believe is a newborn great white shark? A fresh out of the womb, newborn great white shark.
Why are we recording this right now? I feel like I need to stop everything and go look this up.
I will show you this picture because it's crazy. But the cool thing is that we've never witnessed great white sharks breeding. We've never witnessed the birth of a great white shark. We have no idea where they do this, how they do this. We don't know anything about their mating, which is crazy. So to find what we believe is a newborn great white shark is insane. But the reason I bring it up is because they're just like blue-tongued skinks, where a lot of animals, like for example, like dogs, they have a puppy look. They have like a baby look. And I forget what the term is. There's a term, but blue-tongued skinks fall into this category of like, they look the exact same.
They look like an adult. They're just mini.
They don't look like babies or puppies. They just look smaller. And great white sharks are the same way. Where like it literally,
so little shark.
It looks like a fully formed giant shark, but it's this big. I think they said it was like 4 or 5 feet long.
Stop! Oh my gosh!
And the reason they believe it's newborn is because it's almost solid white. And so they're believing now, potentially, this is such a tangent, guys. I'm so sorry, but
it's animals. This is fine.
And if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with aquatics as well. I share a lot on my Instagram story of aquatics too, because I love it.
Sharks count. This is good.
But they believe that now that they're seeing this shark, when they first saw it, they were like, is that an albino great white? That's crazy.
It's so white.
But they're believing now that it might have been a total newborn, and apparently the babies might like grow that gray that's on top throughout their life, which is super cool.
So it's not quite a mini version of the adult then, because the coloration
just a
may
little
be
bit. But
a little different.
We don't know. This is like the first time we're seeing it.
That's so exciting.
Right?
And then going back to reptiles, you have panther chameleons who look nothing like an adult.
Little gray nuggets.
Yeah, little peanuts. Little
then
brown things.
Develop their colors over time.
Freaking rainbows. Yeah.
Wild.
So,
fun tangent there.
Big thanks to Pangea Reptile for their support of the podcast. They're one of the leading companies for reptile supplies, lizards, and their world-famous gecko food.
They just released their brand new micro feeding dishes made specifically for baby or micro geckos. These smaller dishes can be mounted to smooth surfaces and even branches and will help stop your gecko from getting food all over their enclosure. If you own a gecko, you know exactly how nice it'll be to not have to clean food paw prints everywhere. Head
on over to PangeaReptile.com to check out these new micro dishes along with their other amazing products like their face packs for shipping, chameleon kits, and gecko food. Okay, so I did want to also talk about snakes a little bit.
100%.
So ball pythons are the stereotypical beginner reptile, but I know when we were chatting, you were like, I actually wouldn't even recommend.
I would never recommend a ball python for somebody who's never kept a reptile or specifically never kept a snake.
So how you were saying with me, how my first reptile was a chameleon, and that was taboo, right?
Very.
That's the perfect word for that. When we had met, you're like, I want a pied ball python. That was, you at this point had not owned snakes.
Yeah.
And you were like, my first snake is going to be a ball python.
And I had it in my head, like you said, that I would get a ball python as my first snake because
for the experience,
and because everybody always called them beginners. So I just had that in my head.
Like if I want to own a snake, I first need to own a ball python. Yeah.
But I have always and forever been obsessed with boa constrictors.
Right. That's the one you wanted.
100%.
Yep.
And so I started doing research on, snakes and boas and things like that. And I found out that Hog Island boas were a thing, which are a dwarf locality boa.
Yep.
And dwarf locality boas, there's more than just mine, which is the Hog Island. There are lots of other, look it up, dwarf locality boa constrictors. They're so freaking cool, but they don't get nearly as big as the regular boa constrictor imperators. And so it's just wild, but they get to a much more manageable size. They get about the same size as like a large female ball python.
Right.
But what I love about boas, and that I would recommend actually, I would recommend a boa constrictor over a ball python for a beginner reptile keeper, which is a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we go back to what we were saying, just the personalities of a crested gecko versus a Leo, a ball python gets its name because it stays in the ball all day, not all day, but majority of the time.
And I will say, I do think that is a little bit of a like stereotype that they aren't very active and they always stay balled up, and they do to an extent. But the people who give their ball pythons the space that they deserve, trust me, they see a lot of activity.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
But in general, ball pythons are not as active as boa constrictors. And that was one of the reasons I was hesitant on getting a ball python, because I was like, I don't really want a snake that's just going to like sit around all the time. I want one that's a little bit more active.
Which I feel like boas have a very high activity level. Would you say, and this may be a stereotype as someone who's just naive to snake care, but ball pythons are known to be not great eaters, right? Where they get
that
off
is the
food and stuff.
Number one reason why I would not recommend them to anybody who's never had a snake before, because they are notorious for going off of food, going off of feeding, and refusing to eat for months and months at a time, which is so stressful for new keepers.
Is that due to improper care though?
Always.
Okay. Because I'm like, there's no way that it
I will say it 9 times out of 10, yes. Typically, yes.
I figured there are instances where it's just like a snafu, but I'm like, with the amount of times you hear my ball python's not eating, like makes me think that there's something bigger going on.
I will go out on a limb here and say that 75% of those cases are because that they're not cluttering up the enclosure enough and making that ball python feel safe.
Okay. Which goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of not doing,
it's all literally all connected, because it even goes back to the situation that is the argument that breeders use for why they should keep ball pythons in tubs, is because they get stressed out and will go off food because of the large enclosure, when in reality it's not the large enclosure, it's the lack of security and the lack of clutter and the lack of hiding spots,
which is not unique to ball pythons. That is a reptile thing
all across the board,
through and through.
So it's literally all connected, all of it.
So would you say boas are better
100%
eaters
better eaters, and
okay.
that's a big reason why I would recommend, if you're looking to get your first snake, I would recommend either a boa. If you want the big full-grown BCI, go for it. Just know it's a big time commitment, but highly, highly recommend dwarf locality boas for any new reptile keeper or snake keeper, and also corn snakes. And that's because they are notoriously great eaters.
Okay, but corn snakes are a little skittish though.
Yeah, they are.
They're a little, and they'll just fly around.
And that's because they're colubrids. So that's, another type of snake.
That would be I feel like that's the equivalent of like a crested gecko that's like jumpy,
It's the whole reason that I have 2 boas and 1 colubrid, because I love corn snakes. I love my Taz, but I will never have another corn snake because they're too squirmy. Too squirmy for me.
When we go to expos, I will happily hold a ball python. I will happily hold a boa. I will never hold
they're crazy.
a colubrid. I do not trust myself. I am not experienced enough in snake handling to not have that snake just fly out. Out of my hands.
I prefer the slow moving snakes, which in my opinion are the boas.
I have chameleons, man. That is a big reason why I have chameleons, is because they're very predictable. They're slow moving, versus my crested gecko. Love him to pieces, but he stresses me out when he just like catapults.
Totally. So my number 1 snake recommendation would be a dwarf locality boa. And then my second recommendation would be a corn snake, with the caveat that they are very squirmy. They're very, very active, and you will definitely have to learn a lot with like the handling of them.
But that might be appealing to someone who wants one that's a little bit more active, squirmy, or a little bit more of a challenge with handling and things like that. Yeah.
But those are the 2 that I would recommend, mainly because they are far better eaters than ball pythons. Because even though the main reason for ball pythons going off of food is, husbandry and all of that, there are many, many cases where a ball python will just go off food for just random reasons. They're also known to be really picky about their types of rat, the color of the rat, the gender.
We just don't want to deal with that.
It's just too much. So those would be my 2 snake recommendations.
Okay.
I feel like we're kind of wrapping up this topic just a little bit. So I did want to have like one more note.
Thing? Go for it.
Yes, and that is that there are 2 situations that I do consider an animal advanced.
Oh, yes. I remember you want to talk about this. Okay, yes, please.
And that is this is in the most simplest terms, if they can kill you, they are advanced. And that comes down to 2 categories. Venomous, obviously, and if it's big enough. So, for example, like the huge monitor lizards and the giants of the reptile world, the reticulated pythons, the Burmese, in no situation ever should anybody ever get any of those as their first reptile.
Well, and like you don't even have the basics of snake behavior.
Right.
Like you don't even know how to anticipate if a snake is going to strike, or what would potentially cause a snake to feel fearful and it needs to defend itself.
And those species, specifically reticulated pythons, of the giants of the snake world, they are one of the most well known to have intense feeding responses. And if you don't know how to manage or maintain that, that is a huge problematic situation that you're putting yourself into.
Right. There you guys go. Let us know what your first reptile was, or your thoughts on beginner versus advanced.
Dying to know, just because I know this can be such a hot button topic in all the corners of the reptile community.
Yeah, but a big one, and one we want to talk about. And again, we want to encourage and challenge the hobby to move away from this beginner and advanced, right? And instead set new keepers up for success, give them the correct resources, and encourage them to do right by these animals instead of shooting them down of like, no, you can't get that. You don't have any experience.
I mean,
like,
why are we discouraging anybody away from the hobby, in all honesty?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to encourage. We want to encourage and build new keepers up. And I think that is like a huge part of this message, is just we want to bring people into the hobby.
Yes.
And if they're wanting something in particular, don't discourage it. Just educate them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So I think that gives that a little bow on top.
Nice little bow. I feel like we covered all the drama of it.
Yeah. So this was a very reptile heavy discussion. So we're going full 180.
Yeah, we're getting rid of the reptiles for this combo. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, so we're doing tips from the pros. And up until this point, our tips from the pros have been
all reptile related
pros. But you are in the presence of a married woman and someone who has been on a couple of bachelorettes.
Oh, a couple? I've been a bridesmaid over 10 times.
When I say couple, it's literally two.
Literally, yeah. No.
Literally a couple.
Oh my gosh.
So we're giving you guys tips from the pros, aka Lyssa over here, all about bachelorette parties.
Yeah.
So I think the first one that we want to talk about is, where do you even have your bachelorette party?
The
location, right?
Location is everything. And honestly, also, I want to caveat this a little bit with like, there are so many different levels and different types of bachelorette parties, and the location has everything to do with that. And the location literally can just be one night out in your own city, if that's what you want it to be.
Yes. Maybe we should start like the size or elaborateness of it. Right. Also, based off of our analytics, we have about 20% male listeners. So if you want to...
We're so sorry. This can translate to bachelor parties to an extent.
Or you're just like, I wonder what goes on in a bachelorette party. Feel free to listen in. But
trust me, the difference in planning for a bachelorette versus a bachelor party is wild. Watching my husband plan his bachelor party versus the ridiculousness that was mine is crazy.
No, I saw it with a couple of my girlfriends as well.
Yeah, but it's just there are levels to it. People can go way more low key.
Yep.
So location wise, you could go to
stay local.
You could stay local. You could go out in your own city if that's what you want to do. If you want to go to your favorite bars on your bachelorette trip party, do that.
Yeah.
But you could also go super low key and do a cabin bachelorette. And I've had lots of people do stuff like that, or even a beach house. Or you can go to some
full
of the
Vegas.
Full Vegas. You can go full Vegas. You can go to one of the classics or stereotypical ones like Nashville or Scottsdale.
Yep.
I've been to one in both. So you can do all the different things, but the location makes it, in my opinion. And the location sets the tone for what you're trying to do.
Do you want to share where your bachelorette was?
Of course I do. Give me an opportunity to brag on the best weekend of my life all day. So mine was in New Orleans.
And so you had been to New Orleans previously.
Way back in college, maybe like literally I think 10, 11 years ago. And I was obsessed with the city. I was obsessed with the architecture. I was obsessed with the spooky, witchy vibes. I was obsessed with the swampland aspect of it. And it's just such a cool city. Don't get me wrong, it is gross and dirty and stinky sometimes, but it is just a cool city with like such a rich culture and just rich history, and it just had such a vibe to it.
But you knew.
Since I was 20 years old.
You're like, this is where I want my bachelorette.
I went on like a fraternity trip in college and had like a ridiculous weekend with a whole group of crazy frat guys and a bunch of sorority girls. And I was like, yes, this is where I will have my bachelorette one day. This is it.
Yeah.
This is the place.
So when you were planning, that was a no-brainer. Like that had been decided
10 years prior. Yeah.
Way ahead of time. So once you pick the location, something that's really popular right now is themes.
Yes.
Right? And so this is like the overarching theme that will also play into like the decor, right? And we're obviously saying all this like there's different levels, right? Like you don't have to have decor or themes or
this is
just what's trendy right now.
It's what's trendy. It's if you have the time, the budget, and the desire to go all out.
Yes,
that's what we're talking about here. So
for sure.
But the theme is one of the best parts, in my opinion, because that is where the theme is where you get to make it your own. It's where you get to really customize the weekend to you and your interests and your likes and what you love, the outfits, how you want to dress, what you want to do. Like that's one of the themes are my favorite part, which is why I had like 4 themes.
So I was on her bachelorette and we got this little detailed like itinerary.
Oh, yeah. My sister killed it. Just did the best
also
job.
with the itinerary came themes for the day, outfit inspos, links to Amazon, like stuff, which was fabulous, mind you. Like
for all of my friends, I know you had a great time. Love you so much, but also I apologize for the intricacies.
It made packing so easy, though. I knew exactly what I was wearing.
Oh yeah, nobody
every single day.
overpacked. Nobody overpacked except maybe my sister who had to bring all the decor.
What would you say was your favorite theme?
Oh God, I don't even know. I had so many good ones.
Not your favorite outfit, your favorite theme.
Honestly, I think my favorite theme was the witchy vibe.
Okay.
And that's because it was a theme that was also relevant to the location, which I really, really loved. Basically, the vibe was like spooky, witchy, all black, hats, boots, like that kind of vibe.
So you were rocking a black veil and these amazing fishnet snake
They were so fun.
leggings that had these cute little rhinestones on them.
It was one of the greatest outfits of my entire life. I didn't even wear white on my bachelorette trip.
It was spectacular.
Thank you. I
Spectacular.
Really appreciate that.
And then my personal favorite, which I think was everyone else's favorite.
But mine, I was in all black. Go ahead and say it. Yeah.
It was a snake print night. And
Which
this was
obviously I had to do it.
This was so fitting. And there was what, like 12 girls? 14?
I think 17 or 18.
Oh my gosh. 17 or 18?
It was a lot. Which goes into the next category of like the size of the party.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of them. And I was the only one there who has reptiles.
Right.
So you've got like 16 other girls who don't do reptiles whatsoever.
Guys, the group text was freaking hilarious. Quite literally, the group text, I had people texting me on the side being like, hey, like, where do we find snake print stuff? I don't know. And I'm like, I quite literally sent them my Amazon storefront idea list that says, I call it like reptile mom, like fashion or something. I was like, here you go.
There you go.
All right here.
Yeah, I already had my whole outfit already.
Oh, yeah.
All ready to go.
In your closet.
Yeah, but that one was so great because it was not location specific. It was not event specific. It was you specific. And it was like something that was unique to you that all of your girlfriends love and appreciate about you, even if they're not snake keepers or even have any interest in that. They know it's a passion of yours, and everyone was so happy to just
and by wearing all of that, they were like being supportive of me and who I am, and it's like I'll cry talking about it. But it was so special.
But that one was not a bachelorette thing. That was a you thing, and that to me was really special to kind of witness.
Yeah.
And your sister actually got everyone these cute little snake rings, so I'm actually wearing my.
We didn't even notice that.
My little snake ring left over from your bachelorette.
Yes.
So I thought that was fitting because I knew we were talking about.
Yeah. No, I love that you wore that.
And then there was like little snake print like tattoos that people could do.
It was so fun.
So, okay, we can talk about the number of girls then, right? Since we were talking about like the size of everything. So I would say you had a lot.
It was a big group.
Well, let's start with this. How many bridesmaids did you have?
10.
Okay, so that's 10, 10 right there, right? Plus then you had a couple of girlfriends who like weren't bridesmaids specifically, but are close girlfriends that you wanted to be there to celebrate, which I think is also becoming more common now to extend an invite to your bachelorette beyond just your bridesmaids.
I can think of, I said this earlier, but I've been a bridesmaid like 10 plus times, and I can think of maybe like 2 or 3 of those trips that had only bridesmaids on the trip. I feel like it's very, very common nowadays to include your friends who may not have been able to be bridesmaids, or because, you know, you're limited to numbers and things like that. And so I think that is a very common thing that you should do. If you have friends who may not, you know, be bridesmaids, but you really want to include, do it.
Yeah.
It just adds to the weekend.
Yeah, I think having gone on your bachelorette with as many girls as there were, I was like, note to self, don't have this many girls. And like, I know you have a lot of friends, and like every single one of those people needed to be there, and you wanted them to be there.
But it was a little bit of a nightmare logistically.
To wrangle everybody, we had to get multiple dinner reservations, even for our large party sizes, because they couldn't even take reservations that were that big.
I'm pretty sure every restaurant we went to, we had to split up on 2 or 3 different tables because they wouldn't take the whole group.
Yeah, and it's not that like, you don't expect to be on one giant 17-person table. They wouldn't even take a reservation
most of the restaurants capped it at 12 people. And so I had to literally go on open table and make like 3 different reservations, using 3 different email addresses. It was crazy. Yeah.
And then the amount of Ubers that we had to get, of like getting everyone, we couldn't even get an Airbnb. We had to go full hotel because there were so many people.
Too difficult. I mean, I gave a semi-drunk speech one night where I cornered everybody, and I was like, find your buddy. If your buddy is not around you, find them.
And we had like roommates, right? It was like 4-ish girls to a room. And so you'd be like, okay, where are my roomies? So you could like keep track of everybody.
2 requirements. Keep track of your roommates. If you leave or go home at any point and you don't text the group, I will kill you tomorrow. Like, I was so adamant about that, just because with so many people, you can't keep track of everybody.
Yeah. So I think when I have my bachelorette, I will have it be on the smaller side. I think maybe max of 10 would be where I'd be at.
I will say, weighing the options of having a really big group or a smaller group, there's pros and cons to both.
For sure.
Just know that with the bigger group, you're going to deal with a lot of logistical issues, like the reservations, that kind of stuff. You're also probably going to deal with a lot of drama because there's a lot of different personalities mixing up in there. That's a little bit of a nightmare sometimes. So there's a lot of benefits to having a smaller group. I just couldn't cut it down.
Yeah.
I just couldn't.
Yeah. And then that's how it ended up working out. Yeah. Great. The other thing to consider is cost, right? And so this can be a super sensitive subject. So I was maid of honor for the other bachelorette that I was on. And you have people from all walks of life, which means all different finances, which means all different budgets. Yeah. And I think that's a conversation that, while it may be a little uncomfortable, has to happen early on. Because if you have a couple of your girlfriends who are like, hey, I just don't have it in my budget right now to even buy a plane ticket, decision made, you're staying local, right? Or those girls are like, hey, would love to, just like not in it now.
And I think this topic comes a little bit down to the bride and her priorities, because I think there are situations.
Oh, that's true. Is it like the people you want? Right. Or is it the experience that you want? Yeah, that's a good point.
It goes hand in hand, because as the bride, I am a full defender of all brides everywhere. You should always do what you want to do. And if what you want to do is that big blowout weekend, do it, but be aware that some people may not be able to afford it, and you have to be okay with that.
Yep.
And you have to be okay with whether or not that will impact the friendship. Yep. Like, you have to be okay with those things. And
totally.
If that's something that you're okay with, then go big or go home, you know?
Right.
But if you are somebody that, like, every single girl that you're inviting, you would be completely heartbroken and not okay if one of them couldn't make it because of finances, then stay local.
Right.
So I think it really comes down to what the bride's priorities are in terms of.
So maybe you have to have that conversation first. So then you're not influenced by people being like, hey, I can't afford this. And you're like, oh, well, maybe I have to change what I want. Like, you should, that should be made separately. But then you do have to have a conversation early on of what people feel comfortable spending on, on the Bachelorette. And that could be flights, hotels, like activities, food. Like, it can add up quick.
It is a lot, and you have to be okay with the fact that some people can't do that. And so having that conversation and trying to, you know, gauge a budget and things like that is definitely, I would say, something, you know, important to do from the get-go. Like I pretty much made sure from the beginning, before I even like started the group text with all the girls, like I had different conversations with almost all of them, kind of making sure that like, hey, just so you know, like if you can or can't afford it, like it is okay. You just be honest with me, you know, let me know, like things like that. Like I kind of had an idea of like what my friends were willing to do. And I think that's just, that makes all the difference.
And the activities too, like your sister was great in that she'd be like, hey guys, we're thinking about doing this activity. It's going to cost this much. And let us know like if you want to
and there were some people that chose not to participate in certain activities, whether that was due to, you know, life or money or whatever. Like that was totally up to them. It was like, you can opt out.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
So the activities then are a part of the Bachelorette, you know, of the different things that you can do with it.
Which, minor side note, I did get to pet a wild alligator in the swamp.
That was really cool.
On my trip. Which was just yet another reason why it was a perfect location.
Bachelorettes, I feel like, are so fun. I'm looking forward to my future Bachelor. I've already like,
I can't wait.
Yeah, brainstormed, you know, some potential locations and things like that.
So fun.
But I think bachelorettes are just like a really special.
It is.
Special
it's just,
thing.
I have just such a special soft spot for them, probably because I've been a bridesmaid so many times. But I just think it's like such a cool opportunity to like shower your friend and just make them feel loved and supported. Like I think I cried like 3 times on mine because I was just so grateful for all my friendships and all my people.
And it's probably the one and only time, unfortunately, that you'll have a girls trip with like
all your favorite people.
Yes, because you'll have future girls trips, but it'll be with like smaller groups of those friends. But to have every single one of your like favorite people.
Like for me, I had childhood friends, college friends, high school friends, post-college, real life adulthood friends. Like I had so many walks of life. And I think as somebody who is getting married, if you are, you know, in the process of that or will be one day or whatever, like just don't miss out on the opportunity to have all your favorite people in one space for a night, a weekend, whatever you want to make of it. It's just such a special time. And I think it's just such a great way for the bride to feel appreciated and for the friends to get to meet the other friends and all of that. And
And that was your intention. That would be my intention with the Bachelorette versus the like stereotypical, like, you know, your last night as like a single woman strippers, like the whole, like.
I haven't been single for 3 years. Like that's dumb.
Yeah. So I look at it as more as like your last hurrah in a way, but like really just a time for like your girls.
The opportunity to bring all your girls together.
Yeah.
Is I think just a really special one.
Yeah, and just like celebrate the bride and you in this new milestone, this new chapter. And like, I think that's really special.
Every Bachelorette trip I've ever gone on, and even my own, are just some of my most cherished memories. I mean, it's just, you make great memories on those things, man.
Yeah. So let us know, you guys, like how your bachelorettes.
If you had one, tell us where it was. I would love to know. I love different locations. Like what level did you do a stay in cabin or did you go all out in Vegas? Like let us know. I love this stuff.
Yeah. So that wraps it up. We wanted to give a little something in there that had nothing to do with reptiles, but
random life stuff.
But we're girly, so this is what we talk about.
We gotta give our reptile girlies all the fun stuff.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, all that good stuff.
Remember, we're going live on YouTube as soon as we hit 500.
500, baby.
So we can't wait to hang out with you guys.
Yes, always be sure to follow the podcast at the Wild Time Podcast. I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And I'm Lyssa Lizards.
And we'll talk to you later.
I almost did it again. I almost said, and we're your reptile girlies again.
We can say that. Ready? And we're your reptile.
No, I'm not saying it. Anyways, we love you guys. Bye.